Let's see if we can beat the game without using the new kid. Okay, technically it's impossible to truly beat the game without using the new kid. There are fights where the new kid is all alone and therefore can't be won without using them. And likewise, there are a few fights where the new kid needs to take certain actions in order to actually win. But outside of these situations, is it actually possible to beat this game without using the new kid? To test this out, I started a new game on Diabolic difficulty in order to see whether this was actually possible or not. But just beating this game on Diabolic wouldn't be enough. After all, I could just mint berry crunch my way through the entire game. That would trivialize the challenge quite a bit. So here are my proposed rules. 1. For any fight where there is at least one ally, new kid is not allowed to do anything except skip their turn. Not even moving to a different space is allowed. 2. For fights where new kid has to take a certain action like a timefart, that action will be the only thing new kid is allowed to do. 3. I won't be abusing any overworld hazards if possible. This one's just an extra rule to flex, but also most hazards are technically a result of new kid's fart powers as well, so it seems fair. 4. I'll leave combat assist on because I'm lazy and I'm more interested in testing out strategies than hitting every action. 5. Ideally, no DLC is used, but if I absolutely cannot figure out a fight, I will resort to using DLC like Mint Berry Crunch. This extends to the Ubisoft rewards everyone gets at the start just because those have very high stats at any point in the game. With all that out of the way, let's start at the first real fight of the challenge, which is the first fight against the 6th graders. Believe it or not, this here is one of the hardest fights of the entire challenge. Admittedly, I was originally going to include no items as part of the rules if possible, but this fight killed that idea entirely. Human Kite just dies at the very start of the fight, no thanks to this god-awful turn order. Super Craig blocking off the only safe place for Human Kite to go definitely didn't help, so I had to pop my one and only revival serum to bring him back to life. After finally getting Human Kite to safety, I could cheat the hell out of this fight by just having Human Kite shield up Super Craig while he took out the 6th graders one by one. I also got to do this bullshit with Super Craig's Omega Crash Extra while Human Kite brings him back to safety right afterwards to cheese this fight even harder. Overall, this is how the challenge goes. I just try to find ways to avoid getting hit and cheesing the enemies as hard as I can from a safe position. One move enemies are especially easy to cheese as all you need to do is stand above or below them to prevent them from attacking. Continuing on, we'll soon unlock Mosquito, who is one of the better characters for this challenge. I was actually really surprised just how good Mosquito is in Diabolic. Even though he has one of the lowest HP pools, he actually heals up a good amount of damage thanks to his life stealing gimmick despite Diabolic mode reducing player damage by 40%. That said, you still have to watch his health carefully because he can't exactly take multiple hits at once. Skipping ahead, we have the next hard fight, which is the first Freedom Palace fight. It really doesn't help that I included the rule that New Kid can't move because at least one person's getting shocked after New Kid's first turn, and the shock hits really hard. It also doesn't help that Tupperware can attack vertically, which is somewhat rare in this game, making it much harder to avoid getting hits. Because debuffs don't scale with difficulty and Gross Out is the hardest hitting debuff, I got by this fight with Mosquito inflicting Gross Out with a Mosquito Swarm to deal a good chunk of damage against both Mysterion and Wonder Tweak. With the two down, Tupperware became a total joke as I could just cheese him with Omega Crash Extra. Later that night, we'll unlock Captain Diabetes, who's one of the best characters in the game. He hits pretty hard, he has powerful shields, and he has both knockback and slow. With Captain Diabetes in the party, we can move on to the classy chase in the strip club, which was disappointingly easy. I was really worried going into this fight, but I didn't expect that the strippers would just die in one sugar rush from Captain Diabetes. So I just copied the casual mode speedrun strategy for this and just spammed Sugar Rush at the bottom of the screen. Next up we have the chefs, and this one was surprisingly easy to beat. The chef at the bottom can only move one space, so I just ignored him for the most part. This is where I finally get to use the most powerful formation in all of Fracture But Whole, which is the conga line. Conga, conga, conga. Like I said earlier, very few enemies can attack vertically, so it's really easy to cheese a large chunk of fights in the game by just standing in a conga line to keep most of your allies from getting attacked. This is also where we get to see just how broken knockback is. As you can see, I dealt a whole 41 damage by knocking the chef into Super Craig, while Insolent Shock only did a measly 12 damage. This is partially thanks to all the knockback gear I have, but also, knockback is bugged and scales backwards with difficulty. Instead of reducing player damage, the game's difficulty affects how much damage each party takes. So the player party takes 140% damage while the enemies only take 60% damage in Diabolic mode. But when a character takes knockback damage, the damage gets scaled based on the target they hit instead. So enemies getting knocked into an ally will take 140% knockback damage, which is slightly better than knocking 2 enemies into each other for a total of 120% knockback damage. This is also why knocking enemies into allies is so underwhelming on lower difficulties. As in casual mode, an enemy would only take 40% knockback damage when knocked into an ally, and you only get 1 knockback instead of 2. Diabolic is the only mode where knocking an enemy into an ally is stronger than knocking 2 enemies together. With the chefs down, we're now onto Drunk Randy, and he hits hard and he hits fast since he gets 2 full attacks each turn. This is also a fight where we have to use New Kid's time farts, otherwise this happens.
Fucking yes! Yes, motherfucker, did I just win?
I actually found a cheat strat you can do to completely trivialize this fight, because you can just have your 3 party members stand on the top here and then have Captain Diabetes spam Insolent Shock to tickle him to death. But this is really slow, and I mean really slow. Instead, I had Captain Diabetes and Super Craig just swap aggro every other turn and knock Randy into each other, while Human Kite sits below shielding Captain Diabetes for safety. Now it's time for everyone's favorite bitch, Kyle's mom, and she's a real bitch in this fight. If you attack Kyle or his cousin at any point in this fight, she'll go berserk and get turns in between everyone's turns, including Kyle's and his cousin's turns as well. I realized purely on accident that she does in fact get less turns if there are less characters alive on the field, so I made sure Fast Pass and New Kid were dead before initiating her berserk phase. Because slow lasts for 3 turns and Kyle's mom gets 4 turns with this setup, this let me abuse Insolent Shock to effectively give Kyle's mom 1 turn each round instead of the full 4. By having Mosquito take out Kyle and his cousin, I got to a point where Kyle's mom was all alone and I could just take her out easily. So Brutality is one of those fights that's easy to cheese when playing normally. Just have New Kid get burned and use a time fart to burn all the piles. That said, since I had the no moving New Kid rule, I gotta do this with a Cartman solo. Thankfully it wasn't hard reaching all the piles of weed while keeping Cartman alive, especially since he has that attack that lets him get past Howley. For the security team, the dogs hit like trucks, so I just cheesed it with a strategy similar to a speedrun. I got into a conga line where New Kid's standing and then fought them from this position. Coincidentally, the enemies all got into the perfect position for Mosquito to get grossed out on all of them, so I took advantage of that and spammed the hell out of Skeeter Swarm. Once the head guard's HP got low enough, the extra guards arrived, and this is where I hit some issues, because these guys can inflict confusion from 2 spaces away. I didn't exactly bring enough items coming into this fight, so the New Kid ended up attacking 1 time because of confusion, but since I wasn't in control, let's just ignore that happened, okay? Now it's finally time to fight the Freedom Pals again. Normally the goal is to cancel Professor Timothy's summon with a time fart, but unfortunately that's not a possibility, so I just had to deal with all the first graders on the field, and these kids hit hard. Thankfully so does Gross Out, so I at least managed to get rid of most of the enemies fairly quickly thanks to Mosquito. From here it was just a tightrope walk to avoid getting hit as much as possible while taking out Tupperware. Since Professor Timothy only moves 1 space, it became less of an issue once he teleported off into a corner. Once Tupperware was down, it was only a matter of time before Professor Timothy followed after. By now, I've unlocked my second major artifact slot, so from now on, I'll be sticking with a full crit build for these 2 slots. Even though I take so much more damage in Diabolic mode, The damage boost from criticals is just too big, especially because critical damage is bugged. Instead of scaling off damage directly, it actually scales off the damage you would do if you were playing on heroic mode. I now have 30% critical damage, which means that every critical hit I do gives me 50% extra damage. Because I normally deal only 60% damage in diabolic mode, a critical deals 90% the damage of a non-critical hit in heroic mode. After going to bed, Toolshed joins the party and is forced in for the entire night. We now have to go to the U store to fight Professor Chaos and his minions, and as usual, we'll be cheesing this fight hard with slow. Super Craig and Captain Diabetes against enemies with one space of movement is just the most disgusting thing to exist. It's almost like it's a bad idea giving enemies only one space of movement in a game like this. General Disarray, meanwhile, was a much harder fight. All you need to do is defeat General Disarray himself. No need to actually fight the Chaos Minions, but they were getting in the way, so I had to clear the first group at least. I didn't really have much of a strategy. I just kept attacking and ended up beating him with only Humankind alive. It was really close, but hey, a win's a win. In the next fight, we finally get the best character for this challenge, Call Girl. She is absolutely one of the best characters casually, and she just works so well with any sort of cheese strategies. Phone Destroyer has such massive range and inflicts defense down. Plus she's a tank, so she can enable certain cheese strategies. She's just so good. Before we can take on Professor Chaos, we have just one more round of Chaos Minions to fight. This fight here is the hardest fight in this section by a mile. This is also the fight that made me absolutely hate Toolshed. He is such a bad character at this point in the game. The only good thing about Toolshed is the fact that he's a knockback unit, but it's not as easy to set up knockbacks with him. Right now, he's just trash and he actively made this fight much harder. There's so many enemies, they all hit hard, and it really doesn't help that I'm finding out for the first time that the robot has an attack that can attack vertically if two characters are standing next to each other. Eventually, I managed to beat all the enemies except the robot with Call Girl alone. And because she's the only ally alive on the field and the robot has one space of movement, I just cheated by standing below the robot and spam Phone Destroyer. After the disaster that was the previous fight, I was really worried about the Professor Chaos fight, but it ended up being disappointingly easy. There really isn't much to explain here, so moving on to day 3. While Butters was easy to beat, his dad was another story. For this fight, I made it an extra rule that I would only move New Kid and use the ungrounding ability if there are no ungrounded party members. Otherwise, the same rules as usual apply. This means that I would have to use antidotes to unground my allies. I tried everything I could think of to take down Butters' dad, but no matter what I did, I just couldn't figure anything out. Butters' dad did so much damage that my allies had a hard time surviving. Plus I couldn't deal enough damage to push through the final phase where Butters' dad grounds everyone on a map without New Kid dying. So this is where I resorted to using Mintberry Crunch. It still wasn't easy per se, but it did become a lot easier thanks to his power to unground everyone in one turn, as well as both his invincibility gimmick as well as just Mint on its own reducing damage taken by 33%. In the end, I managed to beat the fight while only having New Kid unground 2 times in the entire fight. And then after beating Butters' dad, I realized that I never equipped the Fist of Chaos, so I was down 91 might. I have a feeling that this fight is probably possible without Mintberry Crunch because of how close I've come without the Fist of Chaos, but yeah, my bad on that. With Butters' dad down, we now get Professor Chaos to join, and he's one of those characters that I consider trash in casual heroic mode, but amazing in diabolic. His Chaos Confusatron is the only good skill he has, but Confusion is just so bad for how annoying it is to use on lower difficulties. On Diabolic, Shock's damage scales much better, and Confusion is amazing as both a defensive and offensive tool. With Chaos in our ranks, we can now move on to the Cheeky Ninjas. I remember this fight being pretty annoying casually, but I very quickly realized that I could just form a conga line at the bottom of the screen and have Call Girl and Professor Chaos cheese the hell out of this fight with Phone Destroyer and Chaos Confusatron. Now we're onto the retirement home, and hey, this time the MVP is Tupperware. I feel like Tupperware is one of the most underrated characters. especially if you play on Diabolic without Min Berry Crunch. He has some niche uses on top of being one of the few vertical knockback units. For this fight, all you need is for all living party members to reach the goal. So I just had Tupperware swap places with the old man on the other side and had him reach the end. Everyone else meanwhile just got themselves killed and in the fights. Just for fun, I went ahead and did some extra side quests. First off was a Professor Chaos quest at the bank, which involves fighting a group of rednecks after. Nothing much to say, I came in with Mysterion and Callgirl and then just abused confusion to take them down. Next up was Callgirl's quest at the D-Mobile, which has to be done with a Callgirl solo. The head crab actually heals more damage than Callgirl can deal, so I thought this was going to be impossible. But then I found out that taunting the boss actually prevents him from healing, so I took him down easily by just using blocked every other turn. This quest doesn't give anything, I just felt like doing it for the sake of seeing if it's possible. Finally I did the Tweak and Correct Therapy quest to unlock the best ultimate in the game. I expected the worst, but surviving was a lot easier than expected. With these 3 quests done, we can finally move on to the police station, and the further I went, the more I realized just how meh Mysterion was for this challenge. For the record, I consider Mysterion the best ally in the game for all difficulties. He has defense down, the hardest hitting single target skill, and 2 different flavors of knockback that work well on all difficulties. He's definitely more of a high skill, high return character. Unlike Callgirl and Mintberry Crunch, who are both low skill units who are never really bad casually, they just have very low damage potential in exchange for making the game much easier. That said, I'm not the biggest fan of Dead Mysterion because you can't revive him and you lose all damage in favor of crowd control. It's definitely still nice to have, and Dead Mysterion can cheese some fights hard, but I also have other choices for crowd control that I would consider better. Overall, it just becomes so much harder to have him attack while also keeping him alive, so he's mostly just been reduced to a crowd control bot. There's not a whole lot to say about Jared. I managed to cheese it by using Tupperware's ultimate to lock Jared and its aids in place and had Callgirl attack from distance. This is why I think Tupperware is underrated. His ultimate is weak, but it has shock and slow, and can be used on so many enemies at once. Next up we have the shove fight, which was definitely more annoying than it was hard. I didn't really have much of a plan going in, all I knew was that I wanted knockback units, and Toolshed in particular was the best one. But I ended up getting this in the absolute worst way, taking up 4 whole shove rounds because I only ever got 1 guy eaten each round. Now it's time to fight our friends in Kun and Friends. I was really worried going into this fight because I only have Callgirl and Professor Chaos at the start. But once I got one person to join my side, it just snowballed into saving everyone else. We're now on day 4 and we're starting things off with the town leaders. I actually changed New Kid's DNA here in order to change the party's starting positions to help cheese this fight. For most fights, the party is placed in order based on tankiness and movement. So by giving New Kid a plus HP DNA, I had New Kid start on the far right to move Callgirl closer to the Raisins Girl. By taunting the Raisins Girl, I locked her into the top left spot and then formed a conga line at the top here to block off the 6th grader and the redneck. I then had Professor Chaos confuse the redneck so that he would just follow the 6th grader and attack him every turn. The head ninja meanwhile was actually bugged and refused to attack the New Kid. The AI usually starts breaking when I play for over 2 hours or so, and I didn't really think too much about it because I've never seen the head ninja's AI break in a speedrun before. I kinda just assumed he doesn't attack you if you're Asian. With the 6th graders down, I had the redneck take out the crab person next, and then I had my party work together to take out the head ninja who's now all alone. Moving on, we have Mitch Connor, which is the worst fight, in the sense that this fight is just so goddamn boring. It took a few tries for me to beat him, but god, it's so annoying how Cartman just randomly starts reflecting damage back. And when he does, I just have to spend a few turns turtling. Maybe there's some sort of pattern to it, but I mean, I have a diabolic speedrun strategy that kills Mitch Connor without giving him a turn. I'm not interested in seeing if there's any sort of consistency to this bullshit. It is just such a bad fight. In the end, I managed to win largely thanks to Human Kite's shields. I was surprised just how much mileage I was getting out of his shield since it was just a glorified heal. It definitely raised my opinion of Human Kite as a unit. This next fight is probably the hardest non-boss fight in the game. I actually caved in and turned on the TV to get rid of 2 pigs at the beginning, but with the pigs gone, this fight is really easy to cheese thanks to Tupperware's ultimates. The 6 creators only move 1 space, so slow makes them immobile. Like I said, Tupperware's good. He can cheese the shit out of quite a few fights. And now we get to one of the worst boss fights, which is Kyle's mutant cousin. Since New Kid isn't required to use timefart to switch between night and day for the free damage phase, I'm not allowed to use it in this fight. And I couldn't find a way to use taunt cheese without the timefarts. I actually wanted to try cheesing this fight by having only 1 person alive when Kyle's cousin starts cheating and putting his turns in between everyone's turns. Because Kyle's mom doesn't really update her turns to be bringing people back to life. Apparently this is not the case for Kyle's cousin. When he cheats, he makes sure his cheats stay active. So I just caved in and used Mintberry Crunch again. It's actually hilarious how hard Mintberry Crunch solos this fight. It's really slow, but this is all you need to do to beat the boss. And of course, sometime after I beat the boss, I realized I could have probably just used Dead Mysterion to cheese the boss. So yeah, I ended up using Mintberry Crunch twice so far, and I might have been able to cut him out both times. Moving on to the Woodland Critters. This is one of those fights where once you find the right strategy, it's actually one of the easier boss fights out there. If you just have a character with one of those charge skills like Sugar Rush or Blindside, you can just shove the healer Beavery to the right 1 space and then have Santa get a full 3 enemy swing every turn without the enemies on the left attacking a single time. As for the right, I just had Professor Chaos and Mysterion deal with them. And now we're at the hardest fight of the entire game, and the difficulty spike is just ridiculous. The first few waves are easy, but the fact that I had to redo every wave just to test out a different team composition for the final wave, which was the only hard part, was just... I was so tempted to just use Mintberry Crunch so many times, but I persevered and finally managed to beat it by replacing my critical damage gear for some defensive gear. After about 3 hours of redoing this fight, I finally managed to beat it, but this last attempt was a 33-minute long tightrope walk. I had to very carefully plan on my turns to get rid of all the worst allies on the enemy side while keeping my party alive. This fight only worked out thanks to Super Craig's upgraded ultimate, because god, the mass confusion is so good. Once the king was alone, I just double taunted my way to victory, alternating taunts to make sure the king only ever uses the hammer attack. Now all we have left are the 2 Mitch Connors. This fight was definitely one of the easier ones to figure out. I just kept the same party as before and beat up Cartman and Kyle until they both died. And there you have it. So other than that one mishap I had on the security fights, I can in fact say that this game is possible to beat without using the new kid. I did have to resort to using Mintberry Crunch twice, both of which were probably avoidable, but at least now, Cartman can't complain about the new kid ruining Fracture Butthole. Instead, he can complain about Mintberry Crunch. Goddamn it, Mintberry Crunch, why you gotta go and ruin superheroes with your real superhero powers?